Ani, I see your light. Bonjour, greetings. Sukoli, hello. And good evening to everyone. I'm Derek, the Community Engagement Facilitator here at the local Community Food Center. Thanks so much for joining us at our Disability Justice Forum. It is my honor and privilege tonight to introduce you to Patsy Day, an elder of the Oneida Nation and a respected keeper and teacher of Indigenous knowledge. This Saturday morning, in fact, I'll be joining Patsy along with my partner and 3-year-old daughter, Charlie, for her monthly 13 Grandmother Moons Learning Circle right here in our dining room. I'd like to thank you, Patsy, on behalf of the community for welcoming us here today on your traditional territory by offering you this gift of sacred tobacco. Yavoko. Thank you, Patsy.
Here we go. Yo, yo, Gaiwani no, oeha, Gaiwani no. It's a thanking song. Yawanko is the greatest thanks we can offer in our language. And Yo refers to the female forces of Mother Earth. Ho refers to the male forces of Father Sky. Gaia is the world, and all around the world we want peace and within. So goli swakwe, greetings to everyone here. Gajijiwani yungets, hatnawani waki daloda honya da aga nyoko honjoda. And so that is the protocol that we use for greetings, and to tell you my native name, which is Big Flower, that my grandmother gave me many years ago now. I belong and born to the Turtle Clan. It's the family I am belonging to. In Onyeda'aga is our way of saying our nation, which is in English Oneida, one of the 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee Longhouse Confederacy. And so I want to, as a descendant of those people, Haudenosaunee Longhouse people who have resided on this part of Turtle Island for over 13,000 years, to welcome you to the traditional territories of our Haudenosaunee here. And thank you for welcoming me into your meetings, and enjoy. Nagitwa, yeah.
Good evening and welcome to The Local. My name is Deborah Swan and I am the Executive Director. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you tonight for this exciting event. At The Local here, we try to address food insecurity in a number of ways. One is providing immediate access to good, nutritious food, but we spend a significant amount of our time working on the causes of food insecurity, and most specifically, the most prevalent cause, which is poverty. I'm really proud of the work that we do here at The Local around engaging our community to work on these issues, and very proud of the fact that we are able to work alongside our partners, in this particular case, Community Living St. Mary's and Facile here at Stratford. I'm really proud of the work we've done most specifically around Bill C-22 under the leadership of Derek Barnes, our community outreach facilitator. And knowing that we've had such a huge impact already at the national level, very excited to see us joining our voices together here tonight locally with our national partners as well, being Community Food Centres Canada and Disability Without Poverty, knowing that the more voices we bring together, the louder the voice will be and the bigger the impact. So thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for joining us in this very important fight, and we look forward to working with you on this issue and others in the future.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sherry Hanley, and I'm the Director of Policy and Community Action for Community Food Centres Canada. I apologize I can't be with you tonight, but thought I'd send a video message to show my support for the event you're hosting. CFCC created the Poverty Action Unit a little bit more than a year ago to advocate for federal solutions to food insecurity. We believe food insecurity is an income issue, not a food shortage issue. This is why we got involved with Disability Without Poverty. We wanted to make sure that the proposed federal Canada Disability Benefit got adopted and that it is adequate enough to end disability poverty. The reason that we are engaged in this is that of all the Canadians that have identified as being food insecure, 50% of them have a disability. This is unacceptable and needs to change. So how do we make sure that the Canada Disability Benefit is implemented and meets the needs of the people that need it most? We need to get the pressure on our government partners to implement it and to co-create it with the disability sector. We also need to use our collective voice to call for change. I want to applaud all of you at the local and the other community members that are there tonight for doing this already. You've been an inspiration to us at CFCC and across the network to show people how to use their voice and engage government partners to raise issues and garner attention for change. I want to give a special shout out to Karen and Matthew for your amazing presentation to the HUMA Standing Committee of the House of Commons. Whether you knew it or not, you had an audience watching you in real time from CFCC and across the network, and you did an amazing job. We want to thank you for that. To all of the government officials that are there today, I also want to applaud you and thank you for engaging with the local and the other community partners that are there tonight. I think it really shows the community members there that their voice is important and that they can help drive change. One of the things I think is really important for you being there, and probably part of the reason why you are there, is that the community members you're meeting with today are the ones who can let you know whether or not government policies and programs that yourself or staff are proposing are working or not. They're where the rubber hits the road. They can tell you whether or not a program is working, whether or not it's adequate enough, whether or not there's challenges to accessing the programs, and can really help you inform what needs to happen to help those in your community. So I want to applaud you for being there. I encourage you to listen tonight, and I encourage you to keep the dialogue going. I know from watching the local that you will be engaging with them regularly, and they'll be mobilizing even further to drive change. So again, I want to thank you for your work, and I want to thank everybody there tonight for being at this event and for focusing on the need to get programs and supports for people living with disability. Thank you so much. Again, I apologize for not being able to be there tonight, but I'll be watching from afar and look forward to working with you going forward. Good luck tonight.
Hello, my name is Rabia Khidr. I'm the National Director of Disability Without Poverty. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be with all of you in person today. I am talking to you from Mississauga, Ontario, the traditional territories most recently of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. This is my first solo video recording, also with my camera or telephone held in my hand, so apologies for any hiccups here. So I identify myself as Rabia Khidr, a hyphen with many hijabs. I'm a Muslim, Punjabi, Pakistani, Canadian woman, wife, mother, daughter of aging parents, sibling of individuals with disabilities, advocate, leader, etc., a person with a disability. I happen to be blind. So hence you'll understand the importance of this solo video recording today. So I hope all of you get a good look at me in this video. Disability Without Poverty. So Disability Without Poverty is a national grassroots movement. We emerged out of a promise that the Prime Minister made in the fall of 2020. He announced his commitment for the Canada Disability Benefit. We felt that we could not leave this promise to government and bureaucracy alone to bring forward in the way that people with disabilities need to truly lift disabled people out of poverty. So we began a learning journey, a research journey, an awareness journey, and a journey to speak out for ourselves through various means. We've published numerous op-eds. We spoke with MPs and senators. We conducted petitions and open letters, and we called on every person with a disability and their friends, family, and allies and organizations serving them to work with us to end disability poverty. C22 the Canada Disability Benefit Bill, was tabled in June or May of 2022. Previous to that was Bill C-35 in 2021, which dissolved with Parliament dissolving and an election being called in the fall of 2021. We ended up in a state of a minority government again. We had to pressure and advocate in order for that bill to be retabled as quickly as possible. We pushed hard and it moved through second reading in the fall of 2022. In fact, we went to Ottawa. Our community partners like the Canadian Community Food Centres of Canada have played a critical role in helping us strategize, in helping us reach you people on the ground across this country in local communities. Your voice is equally important in making sure that the Canada Disability Benefit Bill becomes law as quickly as possible, that the regulations, in fact, address your needs, the needs of people with disabilities around you, people you care about living in poverty because of living with a disability. Now, we know that the Canada Disability Benefit is not the only answer. We know that it's not a perfect bill, but if we wait for perfect, perfect never comes in a minority government. We need to continue encouraging our elected officials, our MPs, our senators to expedite the process. The bill is with the Senate now. We saw a tremendous spirit from our parliamentarians in the House of Commons, all parties united, voting unanimously across the journey of the bill in the House. Now the journey in the Senate continues to second reading. We need the same spirit of our parliamentarians carrying through in the Senate. The role of the Senate is very important. They are the sober second thought. They are there to work for every one of us who need them, to take a second look at what political elected officials bring forward to them. They are appointees to serve us as citizens of this country, as residents of this country. So they have to do their due diligence. We are asking them to expedite their due diligence because people with disabilities in this country have spoken through our movement, through the organizations that serve people with disabilities. Now, lawyers may see all kinds of flaws with this bill. It doesn't have every detail spelled out. We don't need every detail spelled out because we are working in the spirit of doing good. We are working wholeheartedly with good faith. We feel we have the right formula. We have champions who are dedicated to doing right by people with disabilities and lifting 41% of people living in poverty who are disabled out of poverty with a federal top-up benefit. And these are working age Canadians with disabilities, because working age people with disabilities in this country are the most unemployed, underemployed, and impoverished. They need a top-up benefit, and they need it today. It's a matter of life or death. And every one of us needs to exercise our civic duty and talk to our elected officials, talk to our government, talk to people in bureaucracy. We also need to talk to our provincially elected folks, our local folks, because we don't want the federal government giving disabled people a top-up benefit and provinces interfering with that, causing problems, taking away the supports and services that are so critical provincially. Provinces also have to continue doing right by people with disabilities. They have a duty and obligation to continue increasing and indexing their benefits. Ontario did a 5% increase. Well, 5% increase is not good enough to ODSP. A lot more is needed. A lot more support is needed in terms of affordable housing. A lot more support is needed for assisted devices. All that work has to continue and complement the Canada Disability Benefit. The Canada Disability Benefit has to work in harmony with all provincial supports. It's our duty and obligation to demand that for our fellow brothers and sisters living in poverty who live with disabilities. We can end disability poverty together in 2023. Please visit disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca, follow us on social media, participate in our upcoming campaigns to push for the bill to become law and to push for the benefit to be in the budget, delivered to people with disabilities as quickly as possible. Thank you.
My name is Miriam Schut, and I'm the lead independent facilitator for Facile Perth. I'm so glad you're all here. A few months ago, after we released the video that we'll be showing you shortly, I reached out to the local and reached out to see if there was an interest in organizing an event to discuss the challenges and successes of our current society for people with disabilities. There was no doubt in my mind that the local, who have been such great advocates for social justice, would be a great partner. As our idea grew to a Disability Justice Forum, we invited Community Living St. Mary's, who immediately accepted the invite. It's great to see that these local organizations are strong advocates for people who might not always have a strong voice, and I would like to extend my gratitude to them. I will try to keep it short, but I would like to take this opportunity to share a bit about our organization and why we felt that it was time to organize an event like this. Facile, a word with many meanings, but for us it means making things easy, which sounds easier than it is. We offer independent planning and facilitation to people with developmental disabilities and dual diagnosis. Our facilitators work with people to build meaningful life in community. Community members often think that people with developmental disabilities are taken care of by our government. Unfortunately, this is rarely the case. Currently, over 200 people are on the waitlist for services in Perth County alone. Students leaving high school end up graduating to the couch. Families end up in crisis because their son or daughter is now at home all day with very little or no support, and they have to stay home to take care of them. During a 4-year demonstration project, Facile offered facilitation to over 100 people. We supported people in making connections to their community, find employment, volunteer positions, join community groups, and build relationships. We helped them to have a reason to get out of bed. This project was very successful, but our funding ended as of April 2019. The loss of our funding didn't stop us. We continue to see the need for independent facilitation, especially during these changing and challenging times, where people who are vulnerable have become even more vulnerable. We want to respond to the needs of the people in our communities, and we want to help where we can. We will continue to support people with disabilities and other challenges to find that purpose in life, to reach for that life that they want to live, and we continue to do this without government support. And as a registered nonprofit, we rely on grants and donations. Tonight we are here to celebrate the successes and discuss the challenges with the hope to gather action points to end disability poverty. People on ODSP receive a maximum of $1,200 a month and are living in poverty. Although a new regulation allows people on ODSP to now earn more income, for the majority of the people that we work for, this will not make a difference in their life, as they are often not able to work more than a few hours a week. This is why we are so excited about Bill C-22, as this will help people live more dignified lives. But we are not there yet, and this is why this event tonight is so important. I'm excited to learn from our levels of government what their thoughts and action plans are, and to hear from Karen and Aaron, who are incredible disability justice advocates. To get the evening started with some celebrations, I'm extremely proud to introduce McKenzie's story. This mini documentary was produced by Ballinron Entertainment and was made possible through West Perth Smart and Caring Community Fund and the Richardson Family Fund held by the Stratford Perth Community Foundations. When we applied for the grant that made this mini documentary possible, we had a couple of reasons why we wanted to showcase McKenzie's story. Through this video, we want to show to our communities that people with disabilities can be contributing community members when given the opportunity, and that they have lots to offer. You will see that McKenzie has 3 part-time jobs, volunteers, has friends, and has made a huge impact in his community of the town of Mitchell. McKenzie has many valuable social roles, and he belongs in his community. He's a son, a brother, an employee, a friend, a volunteer, and an advocate for accessibility. We also created this video with the hope that businesses and organizations will open their doors to people with disabilities. Joe's Diner is a wonderful example of being an inclusive employer. McKenzie's works here once a week, and we truly hope that more and more businesses will follow suit. We also hope that this video will provide other families with hope. McKenzie is an example of what planning and facilitation can do to help their son or daughter live a good life. McKenzie's story is not done. He wants to stay in Mitchell, the town where people know him, where he belongs, and where people look out for him. McKenzie currently still lives in his family home, but he would like to live in his own home. He needs accessible and affordable housing, something that is not available in Mitchell. We hope we can work together with builders, the city, and other parties to create an accessible and affordable place that McKenzie can call home. We need our communities, community members, and the different levels of government to work together to create an inclusive society. I'm really, really excited to also introduce McKenzie to you, who's here tonight. We will be showing the video shortly. The story was produced by Ball and Run Entertainment, like I said, and it was directed by Craig Thompson, produced by Coy Thompson, and filmed by Andre DePlanty, and edited by Mark Croft, who are here tonight. So, no further ado, please enjoy Mackenzie's story.
Hey! Let's go for a walk. Hey!
My name is Michaela Hintz, and I am Mackenzie's sister. I live in Sault Ste. Marie, which is about 8 hours north of here. It's quite a far drive. It's difficult sometimes with him because I know that he does better when I'm nearby. He likes to know that we're all together, but he also has gotten very used to me coming back. And we like to enjoy the visits when we have them together now.
All right, about to take a big bend here. Like a race car driver.
We've always been really close, to be honest. We've been close since we were really young, and I think that's special with people with disabilities because not everyone has that unique relationship. Every day is different, and I have learned so much from this guy. He always gives me inspiration to keep going and keep doing what I love because he does, and he's able to. People give him the love in life, and I love to do the same. I'm proud of everything that he's done, and I know he's going to continue to do great things with his life, and it's really awesome to see that when sometimes people don't get that opportunity.
McKenzie was born with a virus called cytomegalovirus, and so then a year later he had a full diagnosis of cerebral palsy and global developmental delay. As he grew and developed, he of course didn't know how things would be until he hit those milestones, or maybe those milestones weren't achieved at the same rate or capacity as other children. A few things that we did was we taught some sign language. Kenzie, can you show me tired? Yeah. So that's just ways he communicates as well. Yeah. And other times he has words, like he will often say, "Where go tomorrow? Where's dad?" When he was in his last year of high school, we had passport facilitator. We had funding, and it was our first year funding, and I didn't know what to do with it. And she said, why don't you try facilitation, not knowing what it was. So we connected with Facile.
All right, you ready for the library? My name is Cara McNichol, and I am a support worker with McKenzie. I've been involved in his life for quite a few years now, and I'm in his circle of care. We're gonna clean some movies here, all right? Okay. All right, it's all you. McKenzie volunteers here at the library in Mitchell once a week. They come up with some great ideas of new tasks that he can do. Usually involves some cleaning and sterilizing of the movies, some dusting. The library here has been wonderful for allowing McKenzie the time to come in and volunteer and be part of this. This is huge for McKenzie's sense of worth and well-being. It's a purpose. Ready? Yeah. Ready to get into that pool? Yeah. Uh-oh, it's raining. That's okay, we're gonna get wet anyway. There we go. So McKenzie wanted to swim in his hometown here in Mitchell, and he had a big meeting at the town hall and was able to secure a grant. He got the lift here, right, McKenzie? Yeah. You got the change table. There you go. This is huge for McKenzie's independence. As you can see, McKenzie, who's normally in a wheelchair, does not need any devices at all. He does not have a life jacket on. He doesn't have any floaties. He can walk in the pool. He's weightless, so it allows him to do so. This is huge for him. Let's go under. Good job, buddy.
Facile was involved a little bit to help, make the pool accessible. So they received some funding with Leeds, but then he and Cara worked great together to raise money. Facile is an organization that gives hope where there isn't, in that they can help people create a vision and help that vision come to life. We were connected with different resources, and so he's from that point on, we've been able to go down paths that we never even dreamed.
Hi, Dee. What are you doing? Who's that?
Jude.
Jude?
Are you going to work? Yeah. I'm going home after.
Yeah, buddy, I'm gonna eat at home. Are you gonna eat at home? Dan too. Yeah? Can you put your brakes on, please? Thank you. You're looking spiffy today. He loves coming here. He knows everybody, and everybody here loves to see him as well. So whenever Z's in the house, it's a big happy day. Oh, no, I dropped it. I dropped the spoon.
How's it going, Z? I'm going home today. Are you going home today? He had already had a job in Mitchell breaking down boxes, and we do the same thing. We get orders in every week, and we have a ton of boxes to break down. We put Z to work 1 hour a week, so he comes in every Thursday afternoon.
Hi, Z. Are you hungry? Yeah. Would you like chicken fingers or burger? Chicken fingers. Awesome.
Jude go?
Where'd Jude go? Is he gonna make your lunch for you? Yeah, he is. Do you want some? Yeah, he's gonna go home. Would you like some French fries? Yeah.
Through it all, McKenzie has a very meaningful life. He works 3 jobs. He volunteers, he swims, he does bowling, Special Olympic balls. He goes to music concerts, rock and country. He attends church. What else do? You hang out with friends, you campfires, you camp, and he has a life like anybody else. But his challenges don't limit him. I think the biggest misconception is that people with disabilities can't do anything. Sorry. Or have a meaningful life. And like Kenzie's proof that they can. And when you go, and a disability is no different than everybody has a crutch of some sort. Some folks, in Kenzie's case, it's visible. You can see it. And I think the biggest misconception is that individuals, not everybody, but some folks believe they can't do anything. They can't go to school. They can't go to college. Kenzie has friends that go to college that have a disability. They can't work 3 jobs. They volunteers. They are no different than anybody else walking down the street. They just might move and look a little different.
Okay.
McKenzie has taught me a lot of things. Perseverance, strength. Sometimes you just gotta laugh at life.
Cheers!
He is a son, he's a brother, he's a pet owner, he's a friend, he is an employee, he's a volunteer, he's a participant in life in all areas.
Well, that? What is that? Can we play that? Yeah. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes.
Woo!
She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain. She'll be coming round the mountain. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. She'll be driving 6 white horses when she comes. She'll be driving 6 white horses when she comes. She'll be driving 6 white horses. She'll be driving 6 white horses. She'll be driving 6 white horses when she comes.
Woo!
How's that, Z? Yeah?
That'd be the song of the day.
To moderate a question period. Tonight we have 3 levels of government in the same room, and as a journalist I can tell you that is a rare feat. We also have some disability advocates interspersed at the table here, so we'll have a chance to hear from everybody. The forum has formulated some questions. They asked me to ask for your thoughts, but first we want to do an introduction. We'll start on the far left of the table. We have Karen Wood. Karen is a disability justice advocate. On Karen's right, we have John Nader. John is the Member of Parliament for Perth Wellington. On John's right, we have Erin Jackson. Erin is a disability justice advocate and a member of the Community Equity Action Team in Stratford. On Erin's right, we have Mayor Martin Ritzma. On Martin's right, Jill Temple, Executive Director, Partners in Planning. And finally, we have Matthew Ray, the Member of Provincial Parliament for Perth Wellington. So we'll start with you, John, if we could, with the first question. Since the proposed Bill C-22 is a federal bill, could you tell us about the status of the bill, what it entails, and how it will help, and if there is a timeline on implementation of the bill.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. Happy to do that. But before I do that, I just want to say, first of all, thank you. Thank you to everyone who came out tonight. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you to the local. I always enjoy coming to the local, and the comparison I always use, I know we call this the dining room, but I always think of a kitchen table and the conversations held around kitchen tables. And I always think that coming to the local is like sitting around a kitchen table, chatting with friends, chatting with family, chatting about the issues that matter. So I always like being back here and hearing something new each time I'm here. So thank you. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Thanks for being here. And thank you to everyone who helped coordinate it. So, Bill C-22. So it is now passed through the House of Commons. It is now with the Senate. As was mentioned by, I believe it was Rabia, it is now with a sober second thought for a bit of review. The Senate is a unique place because they are no longer along party lines, and typically a lot of more independent groups within the Senate, which has its advantages and sometimes its challenges. One of the challenges is it's a little harder to speed things through. So it has had 3 days of debate in the Senate thus far at second reading. Once it gets through second reading in the Senate, it will then go to a Senate committee. When it's through the Senate committee, it will go back to the Senate, to the full Senate, for a report stage and for final reading. At that point, if it's approved at third and final reading, without amendments, it will go to the Governor General for her signature and it will become law. If there are amendments, it then goes back to the House of Commons, and then the House of Commons can either approve or not approve the amendments. If it approves them, then at that point it becomes law. If it disagrees with the amendments, it goes back to the Senate. So it's a bit of ping pong there if it gets to that point. If I'm a betting man, which is always a dangerous thing, I don't foresee amendments at this point in the Senate. So that bodes well for the speed through the Senate. And if things continue along the way that they are, it should hopefully receive royal assent, which is the final stage for it to become law this spring. So hopefully before June, when the Senate rises for the summer. So that's step one, though. After this bill becomes law, the bill itself is kind of the bones. It's the bare bones. The next process is the meat on the bones, and that's through the regulatory process. So that's through the government department side of things, through the public service. That's where a lot of the details need to be worked out. So what the amount will be, how it will be distributed, who will be eligible beyond the criteria that are currently in the bill. That's kind of the next step. So at that point, we've kind of made some suggestions through the House of Commons, through the Senate process, of where hopefully some of those rules will come in. Briefly, and Paul, throw something at me if I talk too much. I don't want to monopolize too much of the conversation. But when I spoke in the House of Commons, I raised a couple of issues about what I hoped would come out of the bill at the final stage when things finally get implemented. And my thoughts were based on the idea of dignity. And dignity was the word I heard time and time again when we had a nice round table right in that area there with a lot of community participants. And the way I looked at dignity and a couple of components that I hope to see, first of all, was that when the implementation happened, it would be done with a disabilities lens, so that the process that was used to distribute, to determine eligibility was as clear, as straightforward, as quick as possible. So that was the first thing. The second thing, and it's been touched on already by a couple of the speakers through the videos, was that it wasn't a situation where one government gives with one hand and another government takes with another hand, and there's no tangible benefit at the end of the day. We see this with a few different issues that have happened in the past where support is given and then taken away from another support program. Another angle of that, if $10 is earned here, $10 is taken away there. That's something we hope will not happen. That's something I raised during my speech in the House of Commons on. I believe I was the second last speaker on the bill, so it was kind of a neat way to end the debate on that bill before it was passed. So those are a couple of the angles that I hope we'll see when things finally flesh out. Again, I'm optimistic. I'm an optimistic guy most of the time, so I hope we'll see more details. If I was to be pressed in terms of a timeline, in terms of what happens, with the regulatory process, hopefully quick, but I sometimes that process, the regulatory process, can be slow. That is done through a variety of different mechanisms, something called the Canada Gazette, and we don't need to get into that because we don't want to spend 6 hours talking about government bureaucracy from that standpoint. But I think that the goal is, and hopefully with support of many people out there, we can encourage that process go as quick as possible, because we want it to go quickly. So I'll leave that there, Paul. But if I missed anything, people can please flag it later, and I can try to address other aspects.
Thank you, John. We'll work on your elevator speech after everything's done. Our next question is for Jill. Jill, you're Executive Director of Partners in Planning. Can you tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day entails? And then if you have any thoughts on Bill C-22 and how it could impact people with disabilities.
Sure. Partners for Planning is an organization that provides resources for families who are planning for a future that I think looks a lot like McKenzie's, right? So having that vision and designing a life and a future. So we provide webcasts, toolkits, action guides, that sort of thing. So we do interact with a lot of families in the province, and so we see how families are touched by financial security. Bill C-22 is something that I've been working on since the speech from the throne in September of 2020. I am the chair of the Inclusion Canada Advisory Committee on Income Security, so I've been working at this for a while. John's exactly right. What's coming through, obviously, what's coming through as the bill that will be delivered, is really framework legislation. So it doesn't say who gets it or how much or when it starts. What is included in this framework legislation is an obligation by the government to work with people who have a disability to co-create a benefit that actually can and should end disability poverty. So if we don't get the design right, if we limit it to a certain percentage, right now the federal government, and I'm going to get a little technical now, the federal government only recognizes disability for those people who have qualified for the disability tax credit. So there's a whole application. So for those people who are on ODSP that haven't been able to qualify, can't afford to have their doctor complete the forms, or have been deemed ineligible for the disability tax credit, we cannot have those people left behind. So there's very real risk that if we do this too quickly, and although time is important, we can leave people behind. There is a lot of talk about just delivering this benefit quickly to people who qualify for the disability tax credit. Obviously, as an advocate in this space, I would hope that we would say, well, anyone who qualifies for ODSP should obviously, they've proven to a branch of the government in this country that they have a disability. Why would we exclude them from a disability benefit? There are 13 provinces and territories, each with their own system and their own qualifications, but everybody on an income support regime in those provinces and territories has qualified already. We keep sending people who have a disability back to the doctor with more paperwork and more paperwork. And it can cost $100 to show up at your doctor and ask them to fill out an application, but you've already done that. You've already asked them to fill out the paperwork for ODSP, and now I think it's really unfair that we would then go back, and to be clear, ODSP is $1,200 a month. There isn't $100 kicking around in the pockets of ODSP recipients to complete more paperwork to qualify for a benefit that is designed for them. So I think there's really valid concerns that we need to have in Ontario. And I'm sorry, I'm picking on you a little bit. ODSP pays to the family, so we consider a family unit. So we say if two people who live together, if their family income is too high, then the person with the disability is not eligible to receive ODSP income supports. I think we all understand if we stopped and we thought for a moment about what that would be like for one person in a family to have money and one person in a family to be dependent on that money. We cannot place people who have a disability in a situation where they have to choose between living with someone that they love or income support from the government because they have a disability. So there are really clear things that we need to consider. It has to make a meaningful difference. We can't talk about a benefit that we pay to people that doesn't actually lift them out of poverty. And I think most importantly, we cannot have provinces and territories clawing back provincial assistance or supports designed for people who have a disability. They cannot lose benefits on the provincial side or supports on the provincial side in order to receive the federal benefits. So Rabia talked about it in her video. This has to be a benefit that sits on top of other benefits received. But that's just the start. You know, we've done some focus groups at Inclusion Canada, so this is not us determining what needs to happen. This is co-creation with a couple of hundred people who have a disability, and these are just some of the points that became really clear to us. It does come down to dignity. John's exactly right, but we may not appreciate how undignified we have made the lives of people with a disability in this country. So we can't put a bunch of people in a room or a panel at the front of the room and not have this co-created with people who have a disability. I think I'm done now.
Thanks, Jill. So as part of the Disability Justice Forum, it's important to get some thoughts from people that live with a disability. The next question is for Karen and Aaron on either side of John. Talk to us about how living with a disability impacts your life on a day-to-day basis. How will the proposed bill affect your life or improve your life? And we can start at the far end of the table.
When COVID first hit us and we were put in lockdown, we heard many people say life sucked, they couldn't go out, they couldn't see their grandchildren, they couldn't go to a restaurant, they couldn't have a coffee. That is my life today. I cannot afford to go have coffee. I cannot afford a restaurant. My day-to-day life is pretty sheltered. And all I want is my dignity back.
Thanks, Karen. Aaron?
My life is obviously, because also people living with disabilities, we're not a monolith. We do not all need the same resources and like things like that. So for me, my life is mostly impacted by things like accessibility and resources. I guess a really great example is ODSP. Although we receive benefits, it controls a lot of how we use them. And so sometimes the thing that is best for us to make us better, they won't pay for, they won't help us with those resources. And that impacts my life on the regular because not only do I have a disability, but I'm also a single parent of a child with autism. So every resource that I want to have access to is frequently either blocked or some sort of barrier is created because I either A, can't afford it, and if I want to afford it, I have to pay for it out of pocket, but I can't use money to do certain things in certain ways, or else I'm punished for it, essentially, financially. So this bill passing would definitely open up some of the accessibility to some of those resources that you couldn't otherwise use because you're not allowed to, or they just will not cover them.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. The next question is a combo question for Mayor Ritzma and MPP Ray. I think we'll start with you, Mayor Ritzma. What role do you see your level of government playing in the movement to end poverty for people with disabilities? What types of contributions do the municipal and provincial governments make to help people with disabilities?
So I'll start by declaring pecuniary interest, declaration of conflict of interest. I am proud to be a member of Facile and that organization, and a big shout out to Facile, to Miriam and her group. And so when you ask about what we as a municipal government do, it's where it gets done, because wherever the money flows from, this is where the activity has to happen. And we are the people that are in touch with our residents, and we have to serve our residents. I think back to my inaugural speech, and it said, I made a point of saying that we serve all, not certain pockets of people, but all. And so to answer the first part of the question, I'll answer. I remember, I don't think I was a week in the job, and John invited me out to his office. And I do remember the very first ask I made, and it's right here in this book, was some support for a local agency, local organization that is themselves trying to create some living accommodations for people with intellectual disabilities. And so that was my very first ask. So going back to the municipality, certainly in our room tonight, I have to point out, and I hope I do justice to all that they do, our social services department in Stratford, Kim McElroy, our director, is here, and not only within the city, but with shared services across Perth County and in some of the agencies across Huron-Perth. So through our services, our social services, we advocate for individuals in our community at the federal and provincial level. So that's one. So the other thing that we do is through social services department, we do things like providing discrepancy benefits. And those could be things like braces and CPAP machines, hearing aids, those things that will help stretch the dollars. When you talk about $1,200 a month, then we are there through social services to provide those funds to help cover those costs. And the other piece that I mentioned in a bit is we support agencies that have the boots on the ground, that have the understanding of the job that they have to do, and we support those agencies. And I'll mention a few. Stratford Per Shelter Link, Optimism Place, John Howard Society, Family Services Perth Huron. Those are agencies that we support with dollars that come from levels of government, but we are the shepherds of those dollars, and through the social services department try to stretch as much as we can out of those dollars.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Matthew?
Thanks, Paul. And as MP Nader referred to earlier, I just want to take a brief moment to thank everyone for coming. It's great to be here and hear from your lived experiences and how we can help everyone live with dignity, as MP Nader mentioned as well. And I want to thank, obviously, the local and Paul and Derek and Deborah, who joined us virtually, for organizing all of this and bringing us together this evening. As Mayor Ritzma alluded to, service delivery happens at the municipal level across Ontario. That's how the system is set up. And so the province obviously does provide funding to obviously Kim and her great team and the city of Stratford to administer those with ODSP has been mentioned, obviously, throughout the night and will be mentioned as well in relation to Bill 23. And I know it's a question later to allude to that, so I'll get to that one later. But we also provide supports for housing, rent-to-geared income. We provide supports for Optimist Place as well, and the great work they do for women and children in our community. And it's by where I know Martin and I had many meetings on a variety of projects the city is looking to do. And so really, I know I'm speaking for John right now, but I know we really rely on the cities, our municipalities coming to us, highlighting the local needs, because they obviously are the ones delivering the services. And then we take those requests and needs to our various levels of government to provide, whether that's capital funding or operating funding for that.
Okay. We're not going to pick on anybody tonight, but the next question
No,
is
it's
just
fine.
for you.
I came here to be picked on. I knew I was going.
Is there more in the bill financially and otherwise for people living with disabilities? Will the province scale back their portion of funding for people with disabilities or keep the status quo? And John talked a little bit about that earlier. Will you advocate to keep the province's funding the same or improve it?
So it's a great question. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't answer the first part of it. It also will depend on, so the best example, sort of how this potentially will be fleshed out is the current, so the way Canada's very unique, and we'll talk about the many different programs that are offered to those with disabilities. There's also assisted, was mentioned in one of the videos, assisted devices, which is also another provincial program, medically assisted devices, and the reforms, I agree, that need to be made within there and the percentages that families receive to purchase those devices. And so with Bill C-22 specifically, depending what form it takes, it'll be similar to the healthcare agreement that's in the news currently. The way it works is the federal government decides to bring forward, in the example, Bill C-22, and then whatever is fleshed out, whether it's very simply a top-up, okay, it's pretty simple moving forward. However, if the federal parliament decides they want to help with different aspects of provincial jurisdiction currently, then the provinces would negotiate with, okay, if you're going to provide this top-up, this is what we'll provide. And essentially and this will happen 13 times across Canada. Each sub-sovereign government would do that. But to the second part of the question, I'd obviously advocate to keep it bare minimum the same. So it would be similar to what the provincial government does with pensions so they provide top up with gains provincially for those on the Canadian pension plan for that's low-income seniors. And so similar to that, I would advocate for that, and obviously for improvement, but a bare minimum, obviously, to keep it the same.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Is there any follow-up on that from the panelists? Anybody want to ask a question on anything so far? Jill, you look like you have a question.
Go ahead, Jill.
Only that I wrote that down.
It's also being recorded. So.
I was going to say that.
Okay, so Karen and Aaron, we'd like to ask a question for you two again. We'll start at the far end. How does the community at large see the disabled community, in your opinion, and how does that differ from your everyday life and experience? How can you change the perception?
Well, the community at large sees us as lazy or looking for a free ride. We get that everywhere we go. Go get a job. Go find something to do. Find your own way. It's not that easy. We can't go to work. If we could, we would be there. I can't change how they think, but they need to walk in our shoes.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
I 100% agree with you, and because education is activism, it's how you learn, and when you learn how we live, I think you have a better understanding of what we deal with daily. For me, the greater public, I've noticed, like the community at large, if you have a visible disability, they tend to be far more accepting and understanding of the situation. I appear very able-bodied to people, so it's true, a lot of people have accused me of scamming the system, and they don't know, like, They don't know my pain levels on a daily basis. They don't know that I have been hospitalized for them. They don't know that, for me, my problem with how I'm viewed by the public is when I go and I need help, say at the hospital, they accuse me of drug seeking instead of helping me. They will essentially punish me for seeking the help that I want, so then you don't seek the help. And then things get worse, and then you become what I'm assuming a lot of people would consider to be more of a burden on the very thin resources that we have to serve us in general. So I think that, obviously that kind of sucks, but like, I think that a huge part of like changing that perception is things like this event, educating people. People need to learn that it's really hard to get on ODSP in the first place. Like you were discussing the mountainous amounts of paperwork that we consistently have to bring to the doctor. We always are getting letters about follow-ups and doing this and doing that and having to pay to get the paperwork filled out. And then if something is missed, they refuse the thing that you're requesting, and then you have to do it all over again. And nothing about it is ever easy, but they don't see that part. They just see us attempting to navigate society and wondering why we're not doing more or doing better. Why don't you pull yourself up by the bootstraps? I hurt my back once. I can do these things. Why can't you? Like, it's immensely, like, isolating, which I think is another reason that it needs to be discussed more so that people can be included into the conversation and understand what is going on in our lives.
Okay. May I jump in on that one? Paul?
Yeah.
So you mentioned two words which are so vital: education and inclusion. And part of my work in my former life was as a teacher and as an administrator. And a big part of the educational system that I'm proud of in Ontario, and I can speak for Ontario because I was part of, is our movement towards inclusion. And that inclusion is so important for education because youth, and McKenzie was a student of mine, and it's so neat to see McKenzie and Vicky here tonight. But having youth having the opportunity to be in the same classroom as their peers, not only are they educating their peers about them as individuals, but more importantly, they're educating all teachers instead of just the special education teachers. So education and inclusion are prime pieces that we need to do as a community, starting in our educational system. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. We're going to touch on transportation and housing, which are a hot topic at all levels of government. And this is for Mayor Ritzma and MPP Ray. Transportation is an important issue. In order for people, both in the city and county, to get actively involved in their communities, they need transportation. How do the municipal and provincial governments work to make this accessible and affordable for people with disabilities?
Well,
I'm not going
to mention, you had a big announcement today, which is beautiful, so that'll dovetail well in. So there are two components to transportation, and you're absolutely right. Whether it's going to work, whether it's going to school, but most importantly, being actively involved in your community, the ability to get to places that you want to get to. And so there's two components that as a municipality we are involved with, and certainly through the support, and Matthew will mention this, I'm sure, but certainly our local transit. And a big part of our local transit is the parallel transit. I had the luxury of meeting somebody the other day for a coffee, and they arrived in parallel transit. And that's a system where we have such gifted drivers. I believe we have 16 full-time drivers and 13. I think some people might have come here tonight with parallel transit. But it's I think our budget item for this year on our budget for the city is around $560,000 to support, to allow individuals to have somebody come to their home, pick them up, and take them. It might be a social outing. It might be a doctor's appointment. So that's one aspect within the city. And then the second, that we also gain tremendous support from the provincial government, is our Interconnect, our PC Connect, where people can get on a bus that is accessible and go to other communities. They might go visit a friend in London. They might go shopping in Kitchener. So that piece, both those provide opportunities that are accessible and allow people to get where they want to go, just like myself. If I wanted to go somewhere, I get in a vehicle and go. They have that opportunity as well. Matthew?
Thanks, Martin. So as Martin was alluding to, which didn't plan this at all, but today the province released its gas tax. So essentially that funding is allocated to public transportation. And so Perth County and Stratford in total is getting $871,000 for this fiscal 2023. And they, as we mentioned earlier, they're service delivery. So they deliver the public transportation. So for the city of Stratford, that could include they decide how they want to allocate this funding. And so that could include a new city bus, or it could go to, if it's with Perth County and like the lower tiers there, North Perth and West Perth, it could go to public transportation through that. And Martin also alluded to the PC Connect bus, which is still technically, even though it feels like it's been around for a while now, it is still a pilot. And I know the city and the county have requested additional funding, which I have supported and advocated to the Minister of Transportation, Minister Mulrooney, provincially, to see that continue, because I know it's a great, as Martin mentioned, it enables people to travel from Listowel to Stratford, whether it's for a medical appointment or a visit family, and so to help reduce in a small amount some of that social isolation as well.
Okay.
Just a follow-up, and Matthew's on the spot, so we might as well continue that. So they were kind enough to extend to 2025 because we really didn't get a good shot at this during COVID, because we had to reduce the number of people that could get on the bus and travel on the bus. And we all know during COVID there was less travel taking place because there were less places that were open to travel to. So they have generously supported us to 2025, I believe, Matthew, and we're hoping that, and this is on film as well, that we will extend that at some point as well, because it is important for all members of our society that need that ability to not have the vehicle or the amount of money to take a cab, but want to travel. And so I know Matthew will speak on behalf of us when this comes up for renewal as we move into the 2025. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. The next question is about housing, and this is open to all three gentlemen at the table representing their respective governments. Housing is a big topic across the country, province and city. How are you helping people with disabilities find housing, retain housing, and help them have some control and some choice in where they live? We can start with you, John, if you like.
Great. Thanks for that question. And, it's great to have McKenzie here because McKenzie's from Mitchell. And so it's always great to see McKenzie around Mitchell because I'm from Mitchell as well. And it'd be great if McKenzie could stay in Mitchell and be able to have a home in Mitchell that's accessible to his needs and accessible to anyone's needs who needs specific housing. One of the challenges I've found in the time that I've been a parliamentarian is that a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to housing doesn't work. A one-size-fits-all funding formula for housing definitely doesn't work, and that's one of the challenges I've seen in the last number of years that I've been elected, is that funding is geared to large multi-unit complexes that are too large for smaller rural municipalities to afford. One of my first things I was involved with as a staff member in politics over 20 years ago was actually a funding request from the city of Stratford that unfortunately the city wasn't able to employ because the criteria on it were too stringent. Were too stringent to be able to allow for that affordable housing. So when the funding comes out, it has to be done with a disabilities lens and also a smaller rural community lens to make it work with smaller units, smaller number of units within a single unit, and then accessible to people who need to have. So you need that flexibility to get away from that one-size-fits-all approach. Currently, there's something that's called the National Housing Strategy. There's a significant amount of money available through that program. Unfortunately, locally, we haven't been able to tap into that as much as we would like to or should be able to, because half of that funding is blocked off for large urban municipalities. The other half is application-based for both small and large urban municipalities. So you're fighting against a large urban center who has multiple staff members on site to do the applications for these programs versus some smaller communities where you have one person working off the edge of the desk doing that. So I've always advocated for an approach to funding that's based on a criteria for a community so that each community is able to access it and use that funding to their specific needs. So I know I don't want to steal Martin's thunder, but I know there's projects that the city wants to work on. And so from a federal standpoint, I want to see that funding that's been allocated, has been in budgets for the last 3 or 4 years, be able to flow to those projects here in Stratford, in Listville, in Mitchell, so that we can have those projects happen.
Okay, thanks, John. Matthew, do you want to go?
Sure.
You're going to take it all, aren't you guys?
I was going to let Martin. Yeah, we're going to take it all, Martin. No. So provincially, as John alluded to, obviously, again, similar, the city provides the service, so housing in this instance that we're discussing, and so provincially and federal governments provide funding, provincially, whether that's for capital. So locally, there's a great example with the city of Stratford leading that was the Britannia Street project, and the provincial government provided $3.9 million under the last mandates of the current government provincially for that project, and I know it's moving along well. And I know there's many more. As I mentioned, Martin and I meet regularly, and he calls and texts me all the time. And there are many initiatives, the city of Stratford, but also the larger Perth County as well, whether that's in North Perth, and I know the United Way, with their new nonprofit and housing focused on that, is working towards something in North Perth and I know John and I have also met with Ryan and his team at the United Way on that project and how both governments and levels of government can support that project moving forward. And I know the main vehicle provincially for this type of housing for those living with a disability or those on ODSP is through the Social Relief Fund. Currently, that fund last fiscal year was $1.2 billion for capital projects across, obviously, Ontario. And I know the Associate Minister of Housing, Minister Parsa, is focused on ensuring that we're there and providing housing across the continuum as those involved in housing. No, it's not just one aspect, it's a continuum. So whether it's for individuals who are unhoused in our community all the way to individuals who have good income and still can't afford a place to live.
Okay, thank you. Martin?
So I'll start by thanking both levels of government for their support, but I will also add that we need more dollars for housing to both levels of government. And not only do we need more dollars for housing, but we need those dollars that we know that are going to be there year after year without saying, okay, can we apply and are we going to be successful? And I think it's got to be a larger sum of money, and it has to be more dependable. And also within the community, municipality, there has to be more autonomy as how we can use those dollars to build what we need in our community and not shoehorn us into something that we know through application that we're not going to be able to use those dollars because we don't fit the application. So having said that, certainly we provide services in our community through social services. One that in the end try to navigate people towards housing. In our community, I'm so pleased to have been part of and continue to be part of the Connection Center. And you might say, well, that's not housing. But it is, because what we're trying to do through the Connection Center is to build the relationships through our outreach workers where individuals will have the trust to perhaps for the first time, and we had a gentleman that for the first time in a year and a half take advantage of housing. So certainly there are services, the intensive case manager workers. Those are services that we work with individuals to find housing for them. So that's one aspect, the service side. The other side is, and certainly Matthew mentioned the second phase, and I believe, and Kim's in the room, correct me, that with the second phase of the Britannia Street project, we're looking at 37 additional, am I close? 37? 27. We should have 37. I feel like I'm in an auction here. So that's one project. And the other one that we're working on is with Invest Stratford. We're working on a project through some dollars, grant dollars, with regards to Invest Stratford and bringing partners together to see what kind of housing. If we bring land to the table, for example, as a municipality, and we partner, then we have some skin in the game to determine and to mandate what kind of houses are being built. Because we know construction companies, men and women, build homes and build living units to make a living. So if we're at the table and we're saying we want to be part of it, then we have a little bit of ability to dictate the type of housing that's being built, a Made in Stratford approach. The other one that's just mentioned, and I certainly have had conversations, multiple conversations with United Way, one of the partners that are looking at getting on board with regards to developing housing for needs in Stratford. And the fourth one I can't mention, but I had a meeting yesterday with an individual with an organization that, and I've mentioned this to John, but it's not public knowledge, but another organization in town that's looking at developing housing units specifically for individuals with disabilities. So there are a number of things on the horizon. But coming back to my first point, we certainly need. I also want to mention that we're in our third application for the rapid housing initiative, and that's part of the federal government. And this is our third application, and we were unsuccessful in the first two, not because they were poor applications, is because there's a limited pot of money, and there's a long queue of municipalities that want those dollars to build homes and units in their community. And so I just signed on Tuesday our third application, and certainly an augmented application, but certainly that's hopefully in the works. But once again, that relies on a pocket of money that is kind of fixed, and it's not ongoing support. And that's sort of come back to that point. To make housing work for everyone is we need federal dollars to flow to our community so that we can build what we need in our municipality.
Thanks, Martin. And John, you're going to fast track that rapid housing application through for.
Well, I will do all I can to do, and Martin and I have spoken a few different things before, but one of the things I like to do is walk across the floor and hand deliver a letter of support on different projects. So the housing one is one that I'm particularly invested in because Martin mentioned third try, and there are a couple other municipalities as well who are on their second and third try as well. So these are things we need to be pushing for because rural Ontario needs housing as well. And one of the challenges, it's like that old saying, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. Next best time is today. Mm-hmm. Same with housing. Best time would have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Next best time is right now because housing can't be built overnight. Construction doesn't happen overnight. So the quicker the funding can be allocated, the quicker it can happen. And one of the challenges we often see with government applications is the timelines aren't conducive to construction season. So what we've seen happen is sometimes the funding is announced late in the spring, and then by the time tenders go out, by the time RFPs go out, you're well into the summer, into the fall, and then winter happens and the projects get delayed. So the timing, something as simple as timing and moving something up a couple of months is so important on anything that involves construction.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to open the floor up for some questions.
No, I just advocate kindly for also more control and in regards to where people live. So it's great hearing about, building big buildings with lots of units, but the people that we work for, they want choice and they want control over where they live. So they are more so looking for rent geared to income or subsidies so that they can choose the community where they live. They can choose where they feel safe, where they feel secure, and where they feel supported. A lot of the families that we work for, they don't want their son or daughters living in housing, in subsidized housing, because their sons and daughters are so vulnerable that they feel that they will be taken advantage of, and that's a realistic concern. So I would love to advocate, and I would love you to advocate as well for any funding that becomes available. Don't put it only in buildings, but maybe also look at how can we support people individualized so that they can live the way that they want to live.
And I would just add, and I know Miriam would support me, non-congregated. You cannot congregate people who have a disability.
Any other questions, panelists? Questions for each other or from the guests?
I'd just like to ask for a comment, please, on people living on the street. That is in Stratford, well, and the help that they're getting drug addiction, if that's the reason, is a disability. And I want to understand your perspectives on that. Thank you.
I can take that first,
Sure,
if
Martin,
you
go
like.
ahead.
And I mentioned this, and great question, because homelessness isn't an isolated piece. There are so many variables that create a situation where people are homeless. I forever have been with the shelter link for homeless youth. Those youth are there for many reasons, and we're homeless for many reasons. So I'm going to come back to a point that I mentioned earlier, and that's the Connection Center. Those are homeless individuals that, and a lot, and Ryan Erb and I had this conversation and a follow-up conversation, a lot are men that are homeless. And so the Connection Center is that first step in building a relationship, and whether it's a relationship for somebody to get counseling for drug addiction, or somebody to get connection to somebody that says, yes, we can try to house you. So that is the very first step, I believe, and I was so happy when we were able to open the Connection Center. That's a key step in relationship building. That's the piece that and have we seen an uptake? The numbers are astronomical, the number of individuals that are visiting that location per day. It's absolutely phenomenal. It would be nice if we could expand the hours and we expand the days of the week, but it's certainly been a big plus. We got more work to do, but it's, and thank you for asking. So it's the YMCA, across from the YMCA at St. Paul's Anglican Church, and that's a partnership that, you know, a lot of good things happen with partnerships, and that's one of them, where they thought as a congregation, what can we do about homelessness? And they've opened up, and through United Way and other partners, renovated that location where people can go in and have a coffee, do their laundry, have a shower, and you know, and once again, form relationships. Yes, and you're right. That's exactly what I said. That it's a start. It's not a final solution, but it's a start. Expanding hours and expanding days. You're right.
There's a number of locations too, Martin. You maybe want to mention them as well throughout the county. Connection centers. I think there's one in Exeter.
Yes, they have opened one in North Perth, and I believe they're working with. I was talking to somebody from Feltz, and I believe they're working on one in Wingham as well. Yeah. So there are, yes.
We had a question from the YouTube live stream chat.
Okay.
Ken Wood wants to ask the province if Ontario building regulations will permit the building of tiny homes.
Short answer is yes. It depends, obviously, on the city's building. Like, so we can talk about Bill 23 as well. And so with that the most recent housing bill provincially, and so that gave as of right, so that means an individual with a like a detached house, you can have 3 units. And so whether that's a granny suite above garage, an apartment in the basement, and then obviously you live in the main floor, that's 3 units then on one property. Obviously there are changes to the building permit and parking around that as well, and I'm sure Martin will have comments on this, but tiny homes, the province is in favor of. We're working with our municipal partners to figure out how to implement that on the ground, because each municipality has different requirements, obviously, and we don't want to see tiny homes built right next to the Avon River, for example, or where they could be flooded, depending on how high the water is. But I'm sure Martin has some comments on that too.
Yeah, so I've mixed motion. First and foremost, what's your definition of a tiny home, right? Is that a 4x4 garden shed? So I think you have to delve a little bit into what is a tiny home. And then the concept, and Jill, I think you mentioned this, is that once we do get a cluster of say, for example, they're garden sheds, how do you navigate that? You put them all in, everybody in one spot. What I'd rather see is you alluded to, Matthew, about granny flats or locations that are spread out so that we don't form. And I won't use the word. I just don't want to see where we create an area that is kind of a look down upon community. And that's where we have to be very sensitive about that. We see it as an easy fix. You know what? We can build these sheds, they can go up, and everybody lives happily ever after. But we have to think about, what about washroom facilities? What about laundry facilities? All those things that go with it. There are some small models that are wonderful, but I think it's not only the model, but how we perceive that tiny home community. And I'd rather see it dispersed and, within the community, not a separate community of its own.
Okay.
I agree.
Any other questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question. My name's Peter. I'm on the advisory committee for Stratford for accessibility issues. I also worked a number of years at the Independent Living Center in Niagara, and I was involved in the building of nucleus housing in Toronto, where they had supportive housing throughout the apartment building. So, having said that, I used to have a job, information referral, to help people and help them advocate for themselves. And one of the problems I have now is when the decade of disabilities went away in the 90s, the money ran out, promises weren't kept, and everything went away. The government, the federal government, is making a promise, and I spoke because of John, to speak to C22. And when I was talking to them, you have 5 minutes to speak, I could have used 20 minutes, could use an hour. One of the problems is there's no timelines. There's no money. There's nothing in it but a piece of paper with a title on it. And a lot of the people that were of the parliament were very skeptical that this was ever going to get done because it takes a long time. And then as far as housing go, Matthew, you can answer this. If you're moving to a house, the problem you have is how do you get the money to modify? Well, I'm really dry. There's a $15,000 grant funneled through the March of Dimes. The requirements are that you have to live there for a year. Well, if the place isn't accessible, how do you live there for a year? Doesn't make sense. I tried to apply for that. I didn't get it. And then, of course, it has to be house modified. And that was terrible. Are they ever going to look at that? Supportive housing. We don't always want to be, like, I totally agree with you. We don't want to be packed in an apartment building. all together. Thank you. Excuse me. Oh, that's better. We don't want to be packed all in an apartment building. When I moved back to Stratford, because I'm originally from here, when I went to Niagara, I came back and ended up volunteering for the city for a number of years. But to buy a house or to live here, even though I had inheritance money, which the government tried to take, that's when I learned to advocate, to protect my inheritance money. And then I put it into a house. And I remember in Toronto that my mortgage, at that time was family benefits, equaled my check. And I remember getting cold and opening the furnace because couldn't afford to heat it. Oil was too much. At that time they had oil furnaces. And I had to stand around the oven to keep myself because that's all they paid. And you know, it's only $300 more from that was in the 80s to now, that the check people get now on ODSP. I received no benefits. I get money from my job and I get insurance, but I get no benefits from the insurance company because we were a disability organization and they did not provide benefits because we're all going to go on long-term disability eventually. So no benefits. So even though I'm going to fall through the cracks on this C-22, I know it because I'm not on ODSP. I did put my tax credit in. Tax credit, by the way, is just a credit. That means you have to earn money to get some money back to make it worthwhile. There's so many questions. How are they going to provide housing if there's no attendant care? And all these houses around, and Martin, you can address, all these houses around Stratford are being built like crazy. I just came out of the hospital after 8 months. First time in the hospital in like 30, 40 years. Went, looked around, and it's built all around me. And my push for architects on a committee to make houses accessible, you can't do that. They won't do it. And it's very frustrating. So we, like you said, we want options where we live. If I want to live in Stratford, I want to choose, and I had to build. I'm fortunate enough that I could, but I didn't get any help. Matter of fact, my house cost more because of the accessibility features I put into it. So, having said all that, is $15,000 enough to modify a house? A one-time, you can't do it twice, because I tried. A one-time $15,000 and live there before. If you're going to live there before, what are you going to do? So there, question from Matthew. $15,000 home modification program needs revamping. Are they going to revamp that? It also goes to vehicle modification, but that's a little better program. And Martin, you and I talked, what can we do to get the architects to grab the book document that we made on universal design and take that book that's in the City Hall right now, where they can take that and start using that as a universal design project so architects understand. And John, I know you and I talked. Matter of fact, that's how I met. I wrote letters when the COVID-19 was coming across, and we were promised this great amount of money coming to us, and it never came because it was a promise they made to look good. We got $500 one time. Well, you know what? People with disabilities had to order out because the attendants, they couldn't get them anymore. They were short supply. There's so many issues that I could talk for a while, but people are going to get sick of me. But really, when they put the C-22, I wasn't able to address all these issues. And if they don't do it right, and the timeline, they admitted difficult. Look, it's in the Senate. I thought it was past the Senate. Wow, I don't mean to be all negative. I sound all negative. But I've been in a wheelchair for 40 years. And I fought for a lot that I had. And that's where I got it. I'm able to work full time. But we are disabled. And we are active when we can. But my last point will be, as it was already stated, it's for the working disabled. Working age. disabled. Like, how does that help me? I'm 62. I'm 3 years from retirement. When I retire, I'm automatically not disabled anymore.
We have to fix that too.
Yeah, I don't. You know, there's so much that is wrong that if they call an election, like they did last year when they announced a day before the Canadian Disabilities Act, and I mentioned to Carla Cointreau, you know what? She cut me off Twitter. I was polite. I never swore or anything. And she cut me off of Twitter because I asked her a question. How can you call an election or announce that Canadian Disabilities Act benefit the day before they call an election? So I don't know if that was a question, but it sure was a heavy statement. And I always want to fight for others because I'm doing okay now. I'm under the poverty line, according to the definition. Affordable housing is not affordable, by the way. It's subsidized housing. People need subsidy. Again, it's got to be there. People aren't going to live. And there's got to be the support program where there are workers, health care to come into homes. I need attendant care services. I'm on direct funding with the independent living centers where I self-manage my attendance. I am the only one in Perth County on that program. And you know how hard it is to get attendance? So, anybody want to chime in? Now's the time or I'll never stop.
Well, thank you for your comments.
Yeah.
I think John Nader can speak. I think you guys chatted when you arrived tonight, but John can speak to this.
Yeah, just a couple points. And Peter, thank you. Thank you. Actually, Peter, thank you. Karen, thank you. Aaron, thank you. These conversations are what need to happen, and they need to happen time and time again. And Peter, I'm sure you're tired of having the conversations sometimes because, you know, I'm sure you feel like you're hitting your head against the wall, but that's the challenge because we need the conversations from people with lived experiences. So I was so proud that you were able to address the House of Commons Committee because you were able to speak from experience, from lived experience, from, as you said, 40 years. You know, Karen and Aaron, thank you for speaking as well. And I'm going back, you know, Aaron, you'd mentioned earlier about visible and invisible disabilities, those you can't always see. And that's something that without lived experience, without people bringing that to the table, we can't have these conversations. We can't address what's wrong if we don't know what's wrong. We don't have people at the table. So going back to the question, what are the timelines? We need those timelines. We need an idea of where there's come and how the process is going to unfold going forward so that people with lived experience are there at the table developing this so that, you know, in 3 years when you, you know, exactly. That's, you know, that's so what happens? What is the process? You know, I don't want to rehash the entire regulatory process, what we're going to have to go through, but that's the challenge, and that's, you know, why we need you at the table. We need Karen at the table. We need Aaron at the table. We need those conversations because that's reality. And I don't have the answers. I don't have the lived experience. You do, and that's what we need to have. And we need the timeline as well, so we know when this is going to actually happen and people can actually plan ahead. I think Rabia in her opening comment asked about, will this be financed? Will this be the funding allocated in budget 2023, which is likely going to come down in the next couple of months? If it's not in budget 2023, budget 2024. So there we have another year before we have an allocation of funding to back it up. So timelines. It's needed. Can I say one more thing too? Sorry.
Yeah.
I need to thank Karen as well because when I showed up, I didn't bring in my notebook, and she saw me trying to do write, and she handed me some paper. So thank you, Karen, for taking good care of me and providing me with paper so I can take my notes. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Vicki as McKenzie's mom, but I'm also a board member of Facile. But this is totally around transportation. So I manage actually transportation in West Perth, the paratransit there. So I guess mine is more so a question of advocacy for our clients. And we serve those with disabilities and seniors. And the issue is, the fact is ODSP, Ontario Works, will fund medical trips. that's where it ends. So if you want to go to a wedding, you want to go to a baby shower, you want to go buy a new pair of underwear, which in Mitchell is really hard to get, you have to go on the mobility vehicle, and the cost is can be quite costly because you're paying for your mileage, you pay like per kilometer, you pay for the wait time if it happens to be on a day that we don't have multiple trips. I'm just speaking for Mitchell, but I know that is the one thing with our smaller municipalities that we partnership with. And so really it's an ask for advocacy for funding for maybe the client, maybe it's individualized in that as part of funding that comes down from the federal to the province, whatever, that there is a pocket of money that people can use, and it's beyond that living expenses, because it is and it isn't, that it's affordable, or we get more subsidized funding to help subsidize the costs of those individuals that really, really need that. And for example, like somebody who needs to go to a trip just to go buy underwear, which may cost $14, you could be looking at $50-some for a 1 hour, trip down, an hour and a half to go to Walmart. It's nothing like, and you don't think anything of it as somebody who can hop in a car and drive on your own. But it takes the time to, like, I got to book it. I have to make sure I can get there. And hopefully it works in the schedule I want to do, not what the provider is going to dictate because they're so busy. But it really does boil down to having the funding to be able to move around and also live that life that everyone else gets to do that people take for granted, like something so simple, like, as I said, buying underwear, going to your friend's wedding, that we've had calls, like, can you support? What's the cost going to be? And I know it's for a wedding, and I'm like, sitting there as a service provider that I have to fiscally be responsible for. It's like, okay, what can I cut just so I can make sure that this individual gets from A to B at what I can see to be able to at least cover the basic costs of all my drivers, but hopefully they can afford. And unfortunately, there's many times that they can't even afford to do that. So just more so advocacy for in that realm of transportation, and also to speak further, housing is, really looking at that geared to income. Personal interests, yes, but I also know a number of individuals over the years who had lived in our community and would have stayed in our community, young individuals who've had no choice to move to a larger center such as Stratford, just to be able to live independently, be able to hop on a parallel transit to go to the store, go to the groceries, and have that independent world, regardless of what their needs might be. So, thank you.
Can I also just piggyback off of what you said there? When it comes to transportation and booking transit, it talks about that resource and accessibility thing that I was discussing earlier as well. My son, who is autistic, there's a lot of appointments that we've had to book for him in the past that the resources available to him were not within this county. And we've had to go to Kitchener or London and even Toronto to get care for him. And to book those trips, sometimes we just didn't have access to the covered cost of what ODSP would normally pay for, or then they would offer to pay a certain amount, like depending on kilometers, to get somewhere. That's great, but if you can't find somebody to take you there, it wouldn't matter. So that's another part, is that if we don't have the resources nearby to access to even use parallel transit, we can't use it anyways if we can't obtain those resources. And a lot of those resources, like I said, equitably, they're what we need, but they're not accessible within our community. So that's another problem.
Thanks, Aaron.
So I have a comment from someone who's watching from home, Abby Congram, and Mayor Ritzmas. He says hi to you. So she would like to advocate for funding to renovate existing home and apartments to make them physically accessible. She herself has currently an accessible unit, but her family had to pay for it themselves. I know there's a program, Ontario Renovates. Our region doesn't have that program. They chose not to have the Ontario Renovates. So again, we might also force people out of their homes or not being able to leave their homes because it's not accessible, because there's not the funding. And there are programs like March of Dimes, but they have pretty specific guidelines to what you have to, a certain like income level, or and we cannot have that people have to pay out of pocket to make their home accessible. If they're lucky, they have the money. Still wrong if they have to pay for it themselves. But a lot of people will not have the funding. This is what we're talking about. The whole Bill C-22 is because people are living in poverty. So another request from Abby, who is looking out for other people in our communities, to please consider looking into funding for renovations to make homes accessible. Thank you.
If I could just pick up on that and say hello to Abby Conger, a former student of mine, Ben as well, her brother, big brother. Certainly, and this is the comment I made earlier on, that as we advocate for dollars, an increased amount of dollars, we need to also advocate for more autonomy of the use of those dollars. We have amazing resources in our social service department. We have individuals that we can rely on to ensure that those monies, if entrusted in our municipality, are spent wisely. And to the Abby's point, absolutely. Maybe those dollars don't go towards building, and Peter and I had had this conversation around this particular point before the event, but not meant to build a isolated unit. Maybe it's retrofitting a home so that individual can stay in their home. As a principal, I can assure you, my most challenging conversations as youth were graduating, and I remember McKenzie's graduation very well, that the challenge is, what do we do next? And what is there for us and our family? And I think it is important that as a municipality, we have the dollars to invest in those families that would like their son or daughter to stay home in a retrofitted, have independency in their own home, but to stay in their own home. So Abby, thank you for the question.
Thanks, Martin. Any other questions from the guests? Do you want to wrap up?
I have a question.
Oh, one more.
I was just wondering, now we've talked about the connection center and how it's a first step, but I was wondering, because you do emergency shelter link in the city, where you give, say, a month free to a homeless individual for one of these hotels, I was wondering, why is there money going into these hotels when there should be more permanent center for, I'm talking more of a men's shelter? There's a women's shelter in Stratford, but there's no men's shelter. Wouldn't it be a more cost-effective and permanent solution instead of paying out month to month to these hotels that aren't, to be honest with you, necessarily all that safe or decent of a place to live because of various issues such as drugs and violence? I know I speak firsthand. I've been on the brink of homelessness for on and off throughout my life, right? But I'm currently searching for housing right now. I'm on EI, attempting to get on disability at the moment because of mental health problems. But I don't know, I'm rambling now. My main question was, wouldn't it be a more logical and long-term solution to, instead of be putting the funds into this emergency shelter link, for a permanent homeless shelter resident? Yeah.
May I respond to that?
Yeah, Martin.
Thank you for the question. And your question takes me back to a couple things, but one in particular, as I mentioned earlier, I had this conversation with Ryan Erb from United Way because he approached, he sat and approached me as mayor as what are we doing with regards to housing in our community. And towards the tail end of the conversation, I said something to him about the lack of available housing for men in particular, the number of men that are homeless. And he called me back about an hour later and he said, can we meet again? And we talked particularly about that situation. I'll tell you that I'm not an advocate of a men's shelter per se. What I'm an advocate of, two things. One is integrated living. And so that if it's part, if if there's accommodations built and it's part of a overall housing unit, where instead of we just say, okay, homeless men, that's where you're living, then we elevate the lives of everybody in our community. So we don't, it's integrated, it's not isolated. The second part is, and this comes back to the our third time application through the city to the federal government with regards to building homes, smaller homes, and having the support on site, whether it's mental health, whether it's eating disorders, whatever it is, but having those supportive agencies on site to support the individuals that are living in those smaller units. So
that was a comment I was going to have. If you had a more, instead of these hotels, if you had a more, like, if you had a more permanent place, wouldn't that also come with mental health workers and shelter workers?
Absolutely.
That would help homeless males, for instance, go to that next step of moving from the shelter to one of these housing units that you're talking about, because it's not always easy to go from living on the street to getting a place. Like, especially when you have mental health or drug addiction issues, or you have some sort of other. Money is a big thing. How can you go into these affordable housing as if you can't afford housing at all in the first place?
So you're absolutely right. That wraparound support to support the individuals so that we can not only support them with housing, but their ability to make that next step and to be able to go into housing and operate that house as their home.
Yeah.
So your point is very well taken, and it's an important investment, not only dollar-wise, but in our people.
In the people, right? 'Cause
Yeah, exactly.
There's more and more homeless men, but there's more and more homeless people around just the downtown core. You see it monthly. There's more and more people that are becoming down and out. And since there's only the 1 month free shelter, like it's not permanent and it's not stable at all. There needs to be a more well thought of solution to how it's like even just temporarily housing the homeless instead of these. That's just what I'm.
No, your point's well taken. Thank you very much for that.
Tech support. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Pam Hannington. I work at Huron Perth Public Health. I'm a community developer and on the health equity team. I'm also co-chair of Poverty to Prosperity, which is our region's anti-poverty coalition. We started in Huron. We've merged into Perth, and I've been sitting here tonight diligently taking notes, and I was going to read them all to you, but in the interest of time, I just want to say that I hope that everybody has heard the voices of lived experience here today, because those are the voices that are going to make a difference in terms of how Bill C-22 is going to actually manifest itself in people's lives. I also want to say thank you to the people who say we don't need a one-size-fits-all approach. And I want to say also, too, that as the Anti-Poverty Coalition, we will be, and we have been, and we will be continuing to follow the progress of Bill C-22, and we'll be taking all of my notes and insight of people here and using that as advocacy tools to move forward to end disability poverty. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for questions. I think we're good. I think we should thank our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to come tonight. Miriam, is there anything you wanted to add before we wrap up?
You're putting me me on the spot. No, I think thank you so much for being here. Thank you for Karen and Aaron for sharing your experience, because that takes a lot of guts to put yourself out there. So thank you. We really, really appreciate it, because we need your voices, and you are also the voices for those that might not have a voice. So thank you, and I really appreciate our people from the government to be here and answer the questions, and to Jill, thank you for your last minute agreement to come and sit here. I'm hoping that this will be kind of like a first of hopefully some more forums that we can do. Not monthly, but maybe like twice yearly or something, to just kind of keep this momentum going, but also kind of maybe keep our government accountable for the things that they have said tonight. We have been taking notes, so we will take those back and continue with our advocacy. I hope our audience have enjoyed the night. I hope they feel that they have learned more, and that because education is where it starts, so that we can end some of the stigmas that people with disabilities are daily living with. And I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank everyone for who's online, and I wish you a safe trip back home. Thank you.